Hello, thanks for coming back to Cooking with Miller. We're going to make apple squash soup today. It's our featured soup for November. It's got squash in it, apples, parsley, garlic, raisins, honey, curry, salt, pepper, and smoky paprika. Apple cider, so it's got those things that you would have in the fall. Let's talk about ingredients. You want to pick good ingredients, a good squash. This is what I picked today because a local grower bought us in a whole bunch of butternuts, and each butternut is about the right size. You can use a sweet potato, you can use pumpkin, and you can use any of the other squashes for this soup. The onions are a mild yellow onion. The apples are pink crisp.
Crips. Yep, C-R-I-P-P-S.
And they're a new apple for us. They come from a grower, I believe that's just north of us. So when you're looking for ingredients, when it calls for a squash, you can use pumpkin, squash, sweet potatoes. Whatever is the easiest for you to use. Sweet potatoes are one of my favorite because you can peel them very easily and chunk them up. Canned pumpkin works just as well. So you want to make sure your ingredients are fresh and nutritious. Sometimes apples can have either too tart of a flavor or too sweet of a flavor. This one likes a sweet apple. Sometimes the apples have no flavor, so it's a good idea. If it tastes good when you buy it, you get it home and take a little taste of it, that's good to use in a soup. Okay, so when we're cooking any soup, we're starting with our savory onions. We'll go in the pot first. And I'll be putting some olive oil in the pot. Now we're making a big batch here, so if it's a smaller batch, you know, be careful with it. You can always make big batches and freeze it. So start with the onions. I personally prefer a coarse soup, mainly because I want to get soup out on the floor selling, and I don't want to take a whole lot of time of blending it. This soup works really nice well blended. So if you have a stick blender or regular blender, food processor, you can always blend this soup up. I won't be doing that today. But my favorite version of this soup is a Thai curry pumpkin soup with shrimp in it. And that was delicious. It was served in a bowl made out of a pumpkin. They took a pumpkin and trimmed it, took out some of the inside. They made their soup, and then they had a fairly heavy curry flavor and coconut milk as a base, and then at the very end they added whole shrimp, and they served it in the pumpkin, and it was so fun. So you see I'm cutting up the onions in small chunks, but not too small. I've got olive oil in the pan, and we'll be sauteing these.
So it's either process it like a special order
until they're semi-translucent.
are two things that I don't really have a handle on either.
Yeah.
So it's up to me.
I always like to add a little bit of salt when I'm sauteing my onions.
Too much. I don't have a handle on it.
Sure.
So that being said, if it's easy enough to put it in like a special order,
This is a fairly simple recipe. It's going to be in our newsletter. And of course, you'll see it on the floor at least twice a week. So you see I cut that parsley up fairly coarse. Now apples. The way I cut an apple is cutting it just on the other side of the seed packet. So I get a piece like this, and then cut down again and again and again. And if it's a good chunky apple, I'll cut off the bottom and the top, throw away the seed packet, cut where the stem is off, pull out the stem, and I'm getting pieces about like that. You can definitely peel your apple before you put it in the soup. I find it doesn't make much difference to me. Some apples, especially if you get an apple that's been held for a long time, like a year or two, those will tend to have very stiff skins, and so you'll probably want to peel those kind of apples. But this one, the last time I made this soup, had a nice mild skin, so I don't feel like I need to peel it. Okay, we're getting down to the end of the apples. That was about 3 pounds of apples, or 8 apples. And we'll get that into the pot, and it should be simmering now. And then we'll put in garlic. So this has got both those sweet flavors of apple juice, apples, and then the savory flavors of curry. There's some honey in it as for a sweet flavor. I think you saw me put salt in already, but I put in a little bit more. All these things will saute for a bit before we put in the apple juice. We'll put the apple juice and the raisins in at the same time. We're going to put some garlic in. This is a whole clove because I am making enough for anybody coming into the store. You will probably make less for your family of 4. So you'll have to adjust the recipe as you see fit. But I'll use up a whole bunch of garlic. These are beautiful garlics we have here at the store. They peel really nice and quick. They have really good flavor. When I do it for soup, I think you've seen this before. Is I'll smash the garlic on the table and then coarse chop it. So if you hold your knife and smash,
And then the rest.
makes this job go really quick. And then rough chop it. You can use a garlic press if you want to. I personally, I'm making so much stuff at one time that is kind of a waste of time for me. The other thing you could do, which is helpful, is to use a blender. Put this garlic in with some oil and give it a good blend in a food processor or a blender, and that gets it nice and small. So it's going to just go right into our pot. Now we'll stir it around. Now we'll wait for this to saute more, so you can kind of see a good picture of it. And we will take apart this butternut squash. So the way I take apart the butternut squash is chop off the top. Now we're going to take down this butternut squash into bite-sized pieces. I cut off the top, and then using a potato peeler, I just peel the skin off. That way you get to use most of what you have here. You could also bake this squash ahead of time. You could bake a Hubbard and eat most of that for dinner and then make your soup out of what's left. A Hubbard would give you a lot. Even this gives you a lot. But we're going to be using all 3 pounds of this squash. There's one part. We got these butternuts, and you see how pretty they are? They're grown right here in River Falls from people that run Grow to Share. The nice group of people that help produce the growing spaces for people who don't have growing spaces in their own yards. So if you want to support them, we have them in our Roundup program every once in a while. This is a fairly easy squash to peel with a potato peeler. Most of the other squashes, you can't do this, but this particular squash you can. And of course the sweet potatoes will peel up really nice like this. Okay, so I did the top part of the squash, which is all squash, and now we're getting down to the seed pod. You just want to scrape out the seeds. But I'll tell you that trying to make pepitos out of them is pretty useless. To make pepitos, or roasted pumpkin seeds, they have a variety of pumpkin that they're hull-less seeds, and they roast up really nice. These ones have the hull on it, and you'll never get rid of that. So we're just about done getting this squash prepared for going in the soup. And the soup is starting to cook down nicely. So we've got the squash all prepared. Our soup is starting to the onions are starting to cook down. The apples, I can see a few of them are cooking down. You can see the parsley in there. To recap, there's 3 pounds of apples, 3 pounds of onions, a whole clove, a whole bunch of garlic, some parsley, and then another 4.5 pounds of squash. And you'll want this to cook down until everything kind of softens. It has salt in it already. You can put some black pepper in now. And some smoky paprika. Oh, there's another ingredient that I usually put in here. Coriander is one of those spices that are Southern Asian spice. My recipe also calls for tomato. I'll put that in a little while. Honey and ginger. And I'll go get a thing of ginger and dice that up and get it in here. You can we got some fresh ginger. We're gonna peel this whole ginger thingy, and put it in there. The recipe also calls for some tomato, so I'm gonna put that in there. I forgot to put it on my original thing. All right, so ginger, fresh ginger is absurdly cheap. So don't think that you have to buy powdered ginger, because this was like 2/10 of a pound. So you peel it with a potato peeler. And you don't have to peel off all the skin. Some people don't peel the skin off at all. You want to make sure you get a good peeler when you buy a peeler. This is my favorite one. I think it's an OXO Good Grip peeler, and I have less problems with that one. So we got our ginger peeled, and now I'm going to slice it. And of course, with the garlic, you could have taken the garlic and put the garlic and ginger in with some liquid like this tomato stuff and blended it up if you'd like that. The last time I made this, it came out with little chunks of ginger, and I kind of like that. You want to chop it up as fine as you would chop up garlic, or a little bit finer than garlic. And it smells so nice in the kitchen when you've got ginger cooking. So always buy fresh ginger. Okay, that's about as thick as you want it. Shove that into the soup. You see how things are nicely cooking down? Okay, now another thing to have on hand when you're making soups is at least 4 cups of hot water, because that helps this time in the process where you can get it boiling quickly instead of waiting for water to come up to boil. So I have a commercial coffee maker that has a spigot for hot water, so that's what I'm going to get. So this is 4 cups of hot water going into our soup. The nice thing about using hot water is it doesn't slow anything down. It'll start boiling in just a few minutes. So if you're cooking this out of your garden in your orchard, so you got fresh apples, fresh squash, I would use fresh tomatoes too. But canned ones are just as good if they're good tasting. So that's the tomatoes and then the golden raisins. This is the time where we could start spicing it up. Here's some curry spice. I already put in the paprika. I put in the coriander, so this is going to be the honey part. This honey is from a beekeeper here in River Falls that we carry at the co-op. So I put in a couple, 4 or 5 tablespoons. This apple cider is actually from Colorado, but it's a good apple cider. We carry it at the co-op all the time, or whenever we can get it. I'm going to put in about a half a quart of apple cider. Now at this point, you're just gonna wait for the squashes to get soft. If you like it to be coarse, you can wait, until they just get soft where they will break. If you like it pureed, which if you do puree it, which is just fine, I would serve it with like a dab of sour cream on the top, or heavy whipping cream, sprinkle it on the top. Or if you're looking for a more vegan alternative, I would do olive oil, drizzle olive oil on top. So this will cook down. It'll take about a half hour for it to cook down, and we'll take another look at it. Okay, so we've got our soup on simmer for a little bit now. It could go a little bit longer, but this is basically what it'll look like at this point. When you cook it down a little bit more, it'll still be a rustic soup. Now at this point you could take your stick blender and blend it up. And a stick blender is really nice because you don't have to take it out of the pot. You could do it in a food processor or a regular blender, but it's so much easier just to do it right in the pot. So you could cream it, or you could leave it coarse like this. The only thing left to do on now is to test the spices, and the way I do that is get a little dish and take some of the broth out. And test it. Well, that may be just about right. This will be what's serving tomorrow at the co-op. You also find it in our deli case in glass jars, because now we have started using canning jars for things like soup and drinks. And when they get more available, we'll be using some canning jars for the salads too. So this is our featured soup for the month, apple squash soup. It can turn into many different things. Like I said, you could make it even more curried with more curry flavor and put shrimp in it. That's just fine. Right now it's a vegan soup, and you can keep it that way, or you can add a little cream or sour cream when you serve it if you blend it up a little bit, and that's also nice too. So that is Cooking with Miller this week. And our featured soup is apple squash soup. Thanks.